Welcome to Unexpected Points. I'm your host, Kevin Cole. I am joined today by someone who honestly is playing making me wait, playing a little hard to get here this evening. He is co-founder. He's worth it, though. Co-founder of ETR, Established the Run. Evan Silva, thank you, buddy, for joining me.
Kevin, yeah, sorry about the making you wait. Just it's dealing with kid stuff, and my daughter going to school like 45 minutes away from where I live, but she's in a good spot, and relative to other kids, probably. I mean, I think everyone's struggling this year with the kid stuff and the school stuff, but yeah, man, thanks so much for the invite and having me on, and let's start talking some ball.
Let's do it. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to have you on. You were the first guest on my little solo venture of last podcast. What would Sashi do? I still got Sashi in the background. Not great for podcasting here, but he's still there. The dream lives on. So yeah, now that we're connecting.
Hey,
here,
by the way, Kevin, and let me cut you off.
Sure.
Actually, you know what? Let me not cut you off, because I think that the two teams that actually tanked, which I don't even think it was tanking. It was more like, like if you were to equate it in real life, like taking a step back, being conservative for a year or two, collecting your assets, being, savvy about your investments, and then, being able to use, what you did to spring forward. Actually, I think we're going to hit on both of these teams. So never mind. Let me not cut you off. Let's just talk about those teams eventually.
Well, we will get to them. I don't know. You probably don't remember that when we did tape this episode, the first episode of the podcast, and it was in the 2019 offseason, early offseason. I was trying to do some like segments back then. I've kind of ditched that whole thing because I don't want to have to think of them every week. And one of them was tank or don't tank, tank or no tank. And you said tank for every single team. So I appreciated that it was just like Bengals tank. You said tank then, and that's when we thought they didn't even have to tank. So I guess that's part of the bigger tanking picture is I don't know if anyone's even successfully pulled off a tank to get a top quarterback like we're seeing with Trevor Lawrence next year. The whole Adam Gase thing. It wasn't a purposeful tank, but anyway. So
I think Jacksonville
we'll talk about the teams.
Might be on its way.
They might be. Yeah, Minshew, that injury may not resolve itself for a while if they're being savvy there. So we'll end up seeing what happens. But anyway, so let's get into the conceit of this podcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth. We're going to draft teams to pick who will be the eventual Super Bowl winner. Obviously, there's some different considerations there. Which team you think is the best, which team has a particular record right now, how they can get into that home field / bye situation, I think is pretty key in this discussion this year, now that we have a new playoff format with only one bye team. And a lot of it's going to come down to quarterback play, as it always does in our impressions on here, because right off the top, I mean, I'll just say that there are some teams, according to Vegas odds, which I've been comparing to different simulations that we run here, who are a bit higher and a bit lower, and I think it may be a difference of opinion on quarterbacks. So I think the first pick here, you know what I'm going to do is I'm more interested in your opinion than in my opinion on this, and I feel like the first team is not that interesting, right? So I'm going to take that as I'm going to play home. I'm going to use my home field advantage here as the host of this podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the Chiefs right off of the board. The one thing that I'll ask you is that our odds for them to win right now, we have it almost 25%. Vegas actually has it, the implied probability in here, which of course has a little juice in there. It's actually a little bit lower at 22%. But they have a pretty hard schedule the rest of the season. We have them as having the 27th. What would this be? Like the 5th most difficult schedule the rest of the season. Do you think that obviously you would pick them number one? Do you think there's possibility that there could be any value left on them when everyone sees them as being clearly the best team in the NFL?
I guess I would have to put more time into looking at odds and making that bet myself, and having some actual skin in the game as it pertains to that bet, which I probably should do, but I have not done yet. The fact of the matter is, though, that the Chiefs, although they do have a relatively tough schedule, they're better than every team on the remainder of their schedule. And I don't think that we have seen the best out of the Chiefs yet. I think that they have, they've been about as good as you could expect. But I do think that we have not yet seen them reach their peak offensively or defensively. And even defensively, and I know that defense doesn't matter, but even defensively, they sort of get it because they are a team that is solid against the pass and willing to give up rushing production. Those teams tend to fare really, really well. The Patriots were like that for a really long time. The fact that they can be somewhat taken advantage of the ground on the ground discourages teams from wanting to throw the ball aggressively against them. And when they do throw the ball aggressively against the Chiefs, they can cover wide receivers. They've been one of the best teams in the NFL in wide receiver coverage this year. They're top 10 in the NFL in quarterback hit rate from a pass rush standpoint. And their offense really has been, I think, on an upward trajectory, especially with like Mecole Hardman coming along as a real offensive weapon. They're relatively healthy, and the guys that they did deal with injuries early in the season, like Mitchell Schwartz, maybe the best pass protecting right tackle in the league, missed a couple of games, I think, with due to COVID tracing and or COVID positivity. He should be healthy after the bye. They're coming off their bye right now, and I think that they're a team that can run the table, even though theoretically they have a difficult schedule. And I think that Patrick Mahomes is absolutely back to being the MVP front runner. I mean, Russell Wilson has 7 turnovers over his last 2 games. Over his last 4, hasn't played particularly well. We'll talk more about the Seahawks when we get to them, but I think the Chiefs are definitely the favorites again.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a bend, don't break type of style to the offense. Now, they'd almost gotten into trouble against the Panthers because the Panthers also converted 3 fourth downs, including a 4th and 14, I believe, another 4th and 7 on a fake punt. So, yeah, in those situations, if a team has this absurd conversion rate, they can get into some issues. But normally they've been able to keep teams down. Now, actually, the one team, though, that they didn't really prevent from having big plays was the Las Vegas Raiders, and that's who they're facing this weekend. So I think this will be an interesting matchup to see how they play. A Derek Carr, gunslinging Derek Carr has been rejuvenated with some 4.2 speed, able to throw to on the outside. So, but I'm sure we'll get to the Raiders also as we go further. But let's move on to number 2 here, and I think you can go a few different directions here. So who do you think, if you had to pick as the most likely team of those not residing in Kansas City?
So if you look at a lot of power rankings right now, which are done by people that are just like look at record, generally just they look at the records and then they use the records to determine the power rankings. The Steelers sit atop a lot of the power rankings right now because they're undefeated. But I think that they are actually, there's like the Chiefs are in their own tier right now. And then, as you mentioned, we could go a bunch of different directions. Still, I'm going to go with the Steelers here. I think that Ben has been playing at a pretty high level this season. They have their offensive line is largely healthy and has been playing at least at a league average rate. They have 3 dynamic receivers in Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and God's gift to football, a.k.a. Calvin Johnson 2.0, Chase Claypool. And defensively, they are – I mean, they can shut you down defensively. They've given up too many big plays in the passing game. I think they're bottom 10 in 20-plus yard completions allowed. So you can have them a little bit from a vertical passing game standpoint. But, I mean, they have the highest pressure rate in the NFL at 45%. They are far and away number 1 in sack rate, far and away number 1 in quarterback hit rate. And I mean, the personnel speaks to itself. The personnel is really, really strong across the board from a pass rush standpoint. So I have my, trepidations about, betting on a team with a 38-year-old quarterback, but I think the Steelers and also their tendency to play down to their competition is scary. Like, they barely beat the Cowboys, and they've done this throughout Mike Tomlin's tenure for whatever reason. But I think that they are right now the second best team in the NFL, albeit a large chunk below Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it with the Steelers is going to come down to. I mean, I don't like to reduce everything to the quarterback because I think that becomes like a caricature of analytics generally. But when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, I feel like when I watch them play, he's looked good, not great. Our grading on him has been pretty mediocre. He's kind of mid-tier. And the biggest thing is the reason for that has been the lack of big plays. He's rates near the bottom 10 in what we would call big time throws, or throws that we grade as being a 1+ or higher on them. And but efficiency wise, he's been a top 10 quarterback by EPA per dropback. And I dug into this a little bit further, and it looks like he's converting third downs on a pretty high level, but he's actually done that pretty well during his career. So the question would be, are we going by the grading metrics? Do we think there may be some regression from his performance, or do we think he can continue to play like that top 10 quarterback?
Yeah, my theory on why we have not seen the consistent big plays in the passing game that we used to see from Big Ben, and I mean, from time to time he'll hit one to Chase Claypool, but is that number one, they have two short area, low ADOT dominators in Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster, number one. And number two, because their offense has sort of changed to complement their defense, and their defense is so good, like I think they don't want to be, and maybe don't even need to be, super aggressive in the passing game. I would agree, though, with the grading that he's about middle of the pack, just across the league. But relative to, I think they're trying to play like, as the old football heads would say, complementary football. And I think that's played a decent role in why they have been winning games, not only in blowout fashion, as we saw last week against Cincinnati, but also in narrow fashion at times. And we saw them against Dallas, like they were in a pretty significant hole. They changed their offense on the fly at halftime, came out in like 4 and 5 receiver sets, lit up the Cowboys, came back and won the game. So I don't know. That's kind of where I stand on the Steelers offense as it relates to the Steelers defense.
Yeah. I mean, the other metrics that kind of go along with that, fastest time to throw, I believe, still for Big Ben. He's working a lot out of the shotgun, where no play action, lowest play action rate, but that's been something that they've done for a while too. So it kind of seems like that's how they formulated their offense, and it, like you said, it plays into personnel. And I know our friend Josh Hermsmeyer, he likes to believe, and I think what we mentioned with Derek Carr earlier, some of this is true, is that the receivers sometimes control that ADOT a little bit more than we like to think. We like to think it's the quarterback controlling it, but sometimes it's the receivers, and whether or not you have someone who's stretching the field who ends up doing that. All right, so we got the Steelers off of the board here. I would have gone with, I believe I would have gone with the Saints here if it wasn't for this. I don't know what's going on with Drew Brees, just because of that, I'm going to pivot over to the Green Bay Packers, just assuming that they're going to get home field advantage. And I just think that that's so critical. And I know there are concerns with the defense, concerns against the running game. Hopefully there won't be another Raheem Mostert 2.0 destruction in the playoffs as far as that's concerned. But Rodgers is playing at a good enough level now where, especially if they can get that bye advantage over everyone else, what you're really trying to avoid is you're just trying to avoid that one down game, which Rodgers is going to have more often than someone like a Patrick Mahomes. So if you have one fewer game to deal with, I think that's just so critical for them in the playoffs, and it will be critical for all these teams in the NFC who are pretty tightly bunched. So I'm going to go with the Packers next. Would you disagree, or would you have gone with someone else there?
No, I wouldn't disagree. But what I would do with my fourth pick is I would try to fade you on the Packers getting home field advantage, which obviously they're the favorite right now. But also the Buccaneers have that blowout win. I remember, yes, it was 38-10. Yeah, they had that blowout win over the Packers straight up. And
Yep.
then and also I think the Buccaneers are a pretty complete team now, and they also have not had their bye yet. And they're still a team that I think is sort of in transition while trying to, incorporate Antonio Brown. And I know we got this HOA thing, with Antonio Brown doing what, whatever he did, but it sounds like the Buccaneers are standing behind him. Certainly Tom Brady is standing behind him. And even if they lose him, like, they can just go back to, running Scotty Miller in as the third part of their three receiver sets. And Scotty Miller has done some very nice things this year. They can rush the passer. They've got two excellent perimeter corners in Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. And also, looking at their schedule, it's not a cakewalk going into their bye by any means. I think they've got to go 1-1 here against the Rams and then against the Chiefs in their next two. But then they've got their bye, and then they've got the Vikings, and it's in Tampa Bay. They've got the Falcons, the Lions, and the Falcons again. And those are all, four, like, they could win out those last four. So if they go 5-1 over their last six, then they can end up with, like a 12-4 record and get that home field advantage and the bye to start the playoffs. So just because you pick the Packers, I'm going to take the Buccaneers, and hopefully they can secure that number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, that I like that. And I think Brady in some ways is the flip side of Ben Roethlisberger at this point. He's throwing the ball downfield more, but he's making more mistakes. He's grading extremely well. We have him in the top. There's kind of a top 4 guys who are separated from everyone else in our grading. It's Aaron Rodgers, who's now a mini gap between him and some of the others because of the fall off of Russell Wilson, and then Brady, Wilson, and Mahomes, all right there. Yet his numbers have not been nearly as good. I mean, he's had the pick sixes, which have weighed on it heavily. He's taking a little bit more sacks than he would in the past, but that bar was so low for what he was at before, and he suffered a lot of drops from his receivers, and all those things have kind of played into depressing his numbers, but having his grade being higher. So are you buying Brady being able to continue this performance level, at least, and assuming that the numbers are also going to be commensurate with that as if the rest of the season?
I think so. And I think that the Buccaneers offensive line has come together nicely, and they haven't had Ali Marpet, one of their best offensive linemen, here for the last 1 or 2 games. And he eventually will come back to solidify that front five. So I mean, I like the way that they've, for the most part, when they don't play the Saints, they've pass protected pretty well. They've gotten pretty good rushing production from their multi-back RBBC. And again, I really believe in their defense. They've got a lot of talented players on their defense.
They definitely do. All right, so we got them locked in for your second pick here. So 4 teams off the board. This one, God, I don't.
This is where it starts to get really interesting, I think.
Yeah, this is because I think, I'm still gonna go. I mean, I still have to go Saints here just because they still have the inside shot to get that home field advantage and get the division with 2 wins there. And the hope would be that you're going to get a Teddy Bridgewater type window here with the defense starting to play better. Where last season, obviously they went undefeated with Bridgewater. I think people probably didn't realize there was a pretty decent drop off in performance from Breeze to Bridgewater, but they had the defense and they had the running game working that entire time. I don't know about Jameis doing the same thing, but I mean, we'll see. I guess I'm not as optimistic as some people on the Twitter sphere are about Jameis's ability to step in here. But I think they have enough going, and I don't know how long of a timeline this is going to be here, but it sounds like it's going to be a few weeks, right? On this type of situation. I mean, maybe they can do a Deshaun Watson situation where they bus him around from game to game or something, but we'll end up seeing here. So, but I think right now, just you have to go Saints here over the Seahawks, just because of the record and because of how difficult the Seahawks are going to have after winning this. A lot of it really is going to depend on what happens this Thursday night for Seattle.
Yeah, the Seahawks are, I think, in a little bit of trouble. They needed that win, I think, against the Rams. They already got beat once by the Cardinals. Or no, they came back. Did they beat the Cardinals?
No, they lost that game.
I know it was 37-34.
That was the beginning of the downspin for them. But yeah.
So, yeah, and look, well, let's just wait to talk about the Seahawks. But
we might have to wait long.
Right.
Do you want to? Well, that'll be the question. If you're going to go, let's see who's next here, because we can pivot right to,
it ain't
to
gonna
your
be the
next.
Seahawks.
Your next.
I'm not going to take the Seahawks.
Oh, you're off of the Seahawks. Interesting.
Yeah.
I might have to just my contrarian nature has been off of the Seahawks now. Now I'm starting to feel like maybe I want to get back on. But go ahead. Russ is underrated.
Just got to fade me, right?
Russ is underrated again.
No, the Saints are really interesting because they're another team that, well, first of all, for multiple years in a row, their defense has begun the season just getting absolutely shredded, and then for whatever reason, they get better over the course of the season. The defense has carried them really the last 2 years in the back half of the year, number one. And could that happen again? I think maybe it has already started to happen. Their pass rush has started to come alive with Marcus Davenport and Marshawn Lattimore playing better lately. And then, how are they going to treat Jameis? Are they going to try to put kid gloves on him and make sure that he doesn't throw those those patented pick sixes? Is Michael Thomas going to come back and be, the receiver that we know that he can be historically, because he's been almost a complete non-factor so far this year. So there's a lot of question marks, I think, about the Saints, and they're sort of a team that I think they could maybe run the table, or they could maybe really peter out over the second half of the season. Right here, I'm going to go with the Ravens. And,
all right, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that the Ravens haven't looked great lately, obviously. And we've, seen them in prime time lately. And, they lost to the Patriots, who almost lost to the Jets the week before. But the Ravens have this week the Titans at home. The Titans are a team that seems to be on the downslope a little bit. Then they go to face the Steelers, and that'll be a tough one. But I think it'll probably be a close game. Then the Ravens host the Cowboys. That should be a relatively easy win. Then they play the Browns, who they destroyed in week one, I think 38-6. And I think the Browns just don't match up with what the Ravens can do well. And then the Jaguars, and then the Giants. So I think the Ravens can really catch some fire down the stretch. They have allowed the fewest points in the league so far, although their offense has been sort of, there's a lot of negative perception about their offense. They're top 12 in the NFL in scoring. And I know their offense hasn't been great, but I believe in Greg Roman, I believe in Lamar Jackson, believe in Mark Andrews, believe in Marquise Brown. The offensive line problems are concerning. They lost Ronnie Stanley for the year. Tyre Phillips, their right guard, is going to miss at least another week. So they're not the team that they were last year. I think they're a lot more defensive oriented, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't, finish out with a lot of wins. And that's sort of what I expect them to do. Give the Steelers maybe a run in the AFC North. And I still think they're a pretty darn good team.
Yeah. It's interesting going into the season. Probably one of the biggest misses that I had, although it's early, so we'll see what happens, was I was buying into this Lamar Jackson taking a step in the passing game going forward. Not that he was going to equal last year's results, because I think we already knew that there was a lot of regression that was coming, but it was more like where the true level was that he was going to regress to. I was thinking maybe it was a bit higher than what some others were thinking, and it hasn't been the case so far. It's been largely due to a few really bad performances. I'm looking here. The Chiefs was really the beginning, right? So when we saw that they couldn't do anything against the Chiefs, despite the fact that they went down the field pretty easily on the first drive, running the ball. Then they decided to kick a field goal on 4th and 2, and it seems like the offense has been downhill since then. But he played pretty well last week, despite the fact that they lost. Obviously, the weather was not so great. He was okay the week before. I think it was a little bit ugly, a little bit up and down against the Colts. So I think there is some optimism going forward for Lamar. And like you mentioned, the defense, it's other than the Kansas City game, and I was a little bit surprised by what happened to them against New England, but I wasn't actually I honestly was not watching that game as closely as others. Do you think this defense, though, I know that they have a similar style to the Steelers with a lot of blitzing, a lot of risk taking that's going on there. Do you put them in that sort of category as being a top team with the Steelers, or is there a decent gap there defensively?
I mean, I still think there's a decent gap just because the Steelers' pass rush is outrageous. But if you consider what happened during the game to the Ravens, they were already without Calais Campbell, who's like 6'7", 300, and they lost Brandon Williams during the game, who is 6'3", 360, after, jumping in the sauna. They lost Brandon Williams during the game. So, and then Damian Harris just had, a marvelous game, and Cam Newton was a stud as usual. And Rex Burkhead, hashtag good at the game. He balled out, and, the Patriots played, at peak performance, and the Ravens did not. And they had some key losses during the game. And, and then in the fourth quarter, like the freaking, I have never heard the rain, obviously I'm watching the game on TV. I have never heard, and I was watching the game with a couple other guys, and they were both, I've never heard the rain hit the camera that hard. Like it was just, gushing down. And so there was nothing that they could do really in the fourth quarter to try to battle back. And look, whatever, it's one game, but and they were playing the Patriots in Foxborough, so it was a tough spot. I was actually on the Patriots outright in that one, but the Ravens. I mean, I think the Ravens are going to finish strong. I still think that they're one of the best teams in the NFL.
Okay, how about and this is going to play in. I'm sure you have a fantasy spin on this too. Hollywood Brown. What's going on there? And then now Nick Boyle's down. Not that Nick Boyle was that involved in the receiving game, but they already, they traded away Hayden Hurst in the offseason. They were really down to Boyle and Mark Andrews, and then they've been using like the fullback Richard kind of as a tight end also, but they're a little thin there. And so I guess number one, can they get on track with Hollywood Brown, and do they even have the pieces that they need now going forward offensively?
No, I think that's an astute point that you make, and that was another injury that happened to them. Nick Boyle went down in the first quarter and against the Patriots, and he's out for the season. He's not a guy that we think of, very highly in fantasy because he doesn't put up, a lot of box score production, but he plays a ton of snaps for them. He's a really good blocker. He's essentially their 6 offensive linemen, and he can be a possession guy on third down. And after losing the left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, Nick Boyle was a guy that could help, their backup left tackle. And, losing him, it's significant. So as to Marquise Brown, it's just that their passing game hasn't taken off. Their pass attempts haven't taken off. I think a lot of people expected positive regression toward the over on the Ravens pass attempts as compared to last season. And that certainly has not happened. Lamar has turned the ball over too much. And, when you turn the ball over, that cuts down on your offensive possessions. And, Marquise Brown, with his opportunities, I think he's been largely fine, but those opportunities just have not been there, I think, as a lot of people might have expected this year.
Yeah. We'll see if they can get on track, because he's still getting a decent share there. So, we will see going forward. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scoop up the Seahawks here, who, as of a few weeks ago, were a pretty popular pick. Our own PFF George was hyping them up as a Super Bowl contender for most of the year. So they've hit on hard times. We mentioned the Cardinals game. So that was, their first loss there. Then they beat the 49ers in a kind of a mess from Garoppolo early. And they're able to score it well there. And then they lose to the Bills and the Rams back to back, and then now come and face the Cardinals again. So it's not looking good here. So a couple different things. One, you mentioned the turnovers. So Russ is turning the ball over a lot, which is unexpected for me. I mean, he had a very low interception rate last year, and it wasn't really it was a little bit lower than what sustainable, of course, but it wasn't an anomaly for him. I mean, he plays conservatively. He's taking a lot of sacks. Now, that is something that I expect to happen, and that's something that he does. And he's playing poorly on third down. That's a big thing there. I mean, I looked through the numbers. He's about mid-tier. The grading, he goes down to about 28th on third down for our grading there. And I look back into the past, and he's only been okay on third down his whole career. I don't know. There might be something about putting him back there and forcing him to pass on longer third downs where he's just not as successful at converting some of there. So there could be some stickiness to that. But regardless, he normally plays so well the rest of the time, and with the scrambling and everything else that he makes up for all of it. So I'm still betting on the fact that, think about the narratives around the two teams coming into this Thursday night. They're still a 3-point favorite. Where in a year where there really isn't that much home field advantage. So I'm gonna go Seahawks here. But the question is, do you think teams? The narrative that I'm hearing, well, not narrative, but the analysis that I've seen out there is that teams are learning how to play them. They're playing a pass defense that's more of a pass defense, even earlier downs, knowing that they're going to throw it more. They're blitzing in somewhat of an exotic way with these pressures that we saw the Cardinals do to them in overtime, and we saw that the Rams are doing to them a little bit last game. Do you think it's possible that people are figuring out how to stop Russ, or is it just a bad stretch for him?
No, I mean, Russ has been around for 10 or 11 years, and teams have never really been able to stop him. I think it's probably because Russ, the recent struggles are probably because Russ is maybe he feels like he needs to do too much because the team around him isn't very good, with the exception of, his two stud receivers. And I do think that David Moore is a pretty good third receiver, but the pass defense is one of the worst in NFL history. And, we talked at the top about how like the Chiefs have sort of, they're playing the right way defensively. They don't have the most talented defense in the league, but they can rush the passer. They can, cover your receivers. They don't give up a lot of big plays in the passing game. And they do give up some rushing production. Like the Seahawks are the complete opposite, where they don't give up a whole lot of rushing production, but they get smashed with explosive plays in the passing game. And I think that Russ is, he's like a really smart guy. He's a deep thinker. And I think that he puts a lot on himself, as he should. But I think that, the turnovers lately have been largely attributed to that. And just one of the reasons I didn't want to take the Seahawks very early is because I don't believe in their team really other than Russ, DK, and Lockett. And now Lockett's dealing with a knee injury. And, if you look at their schedule and the Cardinals, facing the Cardinals on Thursday night, it's a very losable game. Mm-hmm. And then they go to Philadelphia, and that's a losable game, although Philadelphia is also a very winnable game. But then after that, they face the Giants at home in Seattle. They face the Jets at home in Seattle. And then they face Washington, and then they face the Rams at home in Seattle. So they're kind of set up to finish fast if they can get themselves together, and Russ can stop giving the ball to the other team like he has for the last 2 to 4 weeks.
Do you think there's anything to these quotes, Pete Carroll quotes, about needing to be more balanced? And I don't know if they're gonna have that luxury, honestly, against the Cardinals, because they're gonna need to score points, but in that stretch in the schedule that you talked about against the Giants, Jets, good old Washington football team, and then coming back to the Rams again, a team that they said they had to be more balanced against. Do you think there's any chance they revert back to run, pass Seahawks.
Well, I'll tell you what, watching the game against the Rams, I felt like they were trying to go back to that because they were down 2 scores with 8 to 9 minutes left, and they're running the ball between the guards with DJ Dallas, on
Yeah.
first and second and long. And that was really, really discouraging. And, I obviously I don't think that Pete Carroll was right in that, but if that's what they do believe is the answer to their problems, then they're going to encounter a lot more problems because their team just is not good enough to be able to overcome lost possessions. And I mean, watching that Rams Seahawks game, they blew so many possessions. It was a very discouraging game.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a weird kind of perverse way. I'm a little bit happy that the Seahawks haven't done well, so now I can root for Russell Wilson again. Since I had this like lukewarm take that he was a little bit overrated, and then now the Seahawks fans themselves have turned on him. So now I feel like I can be back. I want to be rooting for Russ. I want Russ to be underrated. I've been on that train his entire career until now. So I want to be back. So now I think I can officially get back there now.
Well, the baller move is not to retweet those old hate tweets against you. The baller move is to go back and actually favorite them because the people get so pissed when you favorite they lose their minds. It's like the most passive aggressive and coolest way to address it. I used to do that too because I was, skeptical of Mitchell Trubisky, a couple off seasons back, and I wouldn't retweet what the people would say to me. I would favorite them, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Passive aggressive liking, favoriting tweets is top notch stuff. I was doing a lot of that when I was seeing Seahawks fans like implode what was going on. I was just favoriting all over the place, even though
that a boy going. Oh man, yes. I'm proud of you.
I'm learning. I'm learning. All right, so I think we got you next. So who are you with here? We still got that NFC West. We still got a lot of guys in the NFC West.
We still got the
there.
AFC East champion and the MVP touchdown.
All right,
pitching.
Yes. Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Look, the bet here, I'll be taking the Bills. The bet here would be that they close out the deal and they hold off the Dolphins to win the AFC East, and they hold off the Patriots, who are starting to show some life ever since Cam Newton has overcome the COVID fog. The Bills have not had their bye yet. Now they're entering their bye. If you look at the production of the Bills offense in relation to whether or not John Brown has been 100% or, he's been, banged up or, and out there not playing at 100%, like they are a much better offense when John Brown is out there at 100%. So hopefully he can get back there during this off week. Their schedule down the stretch is, if you would have looked at it before the season, it looked really bad, but it's still not great, but it's not as bad as it looked before the season. So coming out of their bye in week 12, they will face at home in Buffalo, the Chargers. The Chargers are a dangerous team in that they can score a lot of points, but also the Chargers always find ways to lose. They're 2-7. They'll be traveling to Buffalo for that week 12 game. And then the Bills face the 49ers, who have lost everyone. And then the Bills face the Steelers, and the Steelers are going to be a tough opponent, but it is in Buffalo. And then the Bills face the Broncos, who have been decimated by injury, don't have a quarterback. That's another potential win. And then they go to New England, which is not going to be an easy win, but New England is, probably like a 7 to 9 win team over the course of a 16-game schedule. And then the Bills face the Dolphins to close out the year, but it is in Buffalo. So I think they have a chance to finish with a lot of victories. They're 7-3 right now. I think they're set up to win like 11 or 12 games potentially. Josh Allen is he's a wayward quarterback. He's a boom bust quarterback. We know that. That's one of the primary reasons that we argue about him. I think this year had a lot more positive plays than negative. as in comparison to previous years, and a lot of that is attributable to the way that the Bills have built. And Stephon Diggs is fucking ridiculous, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that's why I'm going to take the Bills here. Hopefully, they win the AFC East. They finish as an 11-12 team. Josh Allen finishes, top 4 in MVP votes, and that's where I'm going to go.
No, I like that. I think. Okay, so Allen's another one of these guys where I had a bit of a journey on him where. I mean, maybe you're better at this than I am, but I have to like root for my takes, right? So like the first few weeks, it was getting a little it was getting a little nervous there with Allen and how well he was playing. And I'm coming at it from this perspective that I'd watched the game and I'm like, oh my God, he almost fumbled 6 times, like he almost threw this interception. Like I'm just concentrating on those things the entire time. So I wasn't really seeing clearly. I admit to it though. Like I try to know I have these biases, right? And then in other games like the Jets game, the Titans game, people are like, oh, he's done, he's lose. And I was like, he wasn't really playing that poorly. He had some drops in that Titans game. Yeah, he had the interception late, but the Titans were just marching up and down the field like it was nothing the entire time. And I thought he was playing really well, and he was converting some third downs. He was doing these things where I started to see the positives because everyone was kind of getting some negative on him. So I really like the Bills as a potential Super Bowl team because he has that play where, yeah, he could fumble it 3 times in one game, but maybe he doesn't fumble it all in a single game, and they could beat anybody if you don't have one of those mistakes, right? If you don't have one of those mistakes, which he can do, and I think the defense is a little sneaky, like better than what people think too. They've had various injuries throughout the time. They're kind of getting everyone healthy, and that's something that can come together with McDermott and others there. So I do think they are a stronger than expected team to potentially win, and just with Allen and the way they're built, I think for a Super Bowl run too, like specifically to do that, specifically to beat high end teams a couple of times in a row. I think they're really well built for that. So I love that pick, and like now I can root for Josh Allen again. Like I can root for him now that he's not like potentially being I don't have to hear about people claiming him as the MVP. Of course, if he would have won that game though last week, who knows?
Oh,
I might have had to
man,
be off him again.
I was so excited when Diggs caught that. I was like, yeah, baby. Because Kyler's making this surge for MVP, which I think is legitimate.
Yeah.
I mean, just the rushing production.
Okay, this is hard. So because I kind of want to go Arizona and Kyler, but I'm probably a little bit less confident that their performance will continue going forward, and we'll talk about when we get forward. So I'm gonna choose fake sharp Sean McVay and the LA Rams here. It's a team that you're not in love, right? You can't really be in love with anything except for Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and how that defense is starting to play now. But they have the pieces to get it done. Hasn't been great from a fantasy perspective, but the way they've been able to run the ball with that 3-headed backfield has really taken a lot of pressure off of Jared Goff, and they seem to have figured things out. They kind of have this weird cycle in the NFL, right, where it's he's the savant, he can't be stopped, Sean McVay, and then they were figured out, and now they're back to be putting up those performances. And I think there's also this thing with the Rams where, like in the Miami game, where Goff can look really awful, but in some ways, I like that about a quarterback who he's not scared to throw interceptions, obviously. And they are pretty good at like converting third downs. And sometimes if you're going to lose and you throw 1 interception, or if you lose and you throw 3 interceptions, it doesn't really matter in the game. So I know that that's not something that everyone's gonna like to hear. The question is whether he can string together enough games to actually win the title when they're not really in contention at all to get that bye. And that's going to be the question going forward. But I think they have the high-end talent on defense and on offense to get it done. So I'm going to go with the Rams here over the Cardinals.
A boring team for sure, but a team that is very, a team that you almost want to bet against long term because they've invested so much money into just a small group of players, but those group of players are badasses, with the exception of Koff. But Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, I love what their new defensive coordinator, and I was skeptical that their defense was going to be any good at all this year after losing Wade Phillips. I really considered him to be a big difference maker. But Brandon Staley, I think he might be a head coaching candidate within the next 2 years. He has done so many creative things with their defense, whether it be lining up Aaron Donald against, like identifying the weakest point of the opposing offensive line and just run Aaron Donald, at that dude, like just time and time again. Or using Jalen Ramsey in the star defensive back role, which he played at Florida State. And then, the next week he's shadowing DK Metcalf on, 75% of his routes. And then offensively, this Andrew Whitworth injury, though, I think could be a really, really big deal for them, because we know how pressure sensitive Jared Goff is. And even this year, his passer rating, I think, is like 108 or 110 when kept clean, and then just 38.6 when he's pressured. And they've got, the Buccaneers coming up. Their schedule really isn't that difficult after that. But I worry a little bit about that. But they've been a rock solid team since the beginning of the season. So I think it's maybe like a high floor pick. But not a team that I would have picked, just because I would rather have the Bills, because they're, hey, shit, they could, hit the skids down the stretch, or, lose in the first round of the playoffs, or, whatever. But I do think they've got that high variance, whereas I don't know if the Rams can get up to that. We have seen them go to a Super Bowl, though, on Sean McVay's watch. So I'm going to fade your Seahawks pick here.
Yeah.
And take the Cardinals. And if I get another win on Thursday night, then I think I will be in really good position here with the Cardinals, like almost from like a game theory standpoint. And I don't know if I necessarily believe in the Cardinals. They lost Chandler Jones. They lost a bunch of dudes up front. Corey Peters looks like he's out for the season. Zach Allen is on IR. Jordan Phillips, these are big pieces of their upfront defense, and I don't have a ton of faith in them, but I do have a lot of faith in the playmaking ability of Kyler Murray. His connection with DeAndre Hopkins has just been insane from the get-go. Something I completely blew from a fantasy projection standpoint, and I feel like legitimately embarrassed about that. But they also have like a productive rushing scheme, whether it's Kenyon Drake or Chase Edmonds in there. And I really like Christian Kirk too. So I'm going to go with them right here as my selection.
Yeah. That's the logical next pick. So, the one thing for why I wasn't going with them is, number one, I'm a little bit. I don't know if I really trust their defense. We'll see if they can really put it together. They had some good optics when they won that Seattle game, but they were pretty, poor the entire time. They weren't, I don't think, great against the Bills. Obviously, that was another shootout. So you are going to need that offensive production just week in, week out. And so here's the thing with Murray. So I've been wrong about his fantasy year, because I thought coming into this season, he didn't pass the ball that well last year, really. Not as well as people thought.
To support your point, though, Kevin, I don't think he's passed the ball this year as well as people.
Right.
Think.
Well, yeah. That's what I'm going to get into. I think I was wrong, but I was right. Like I like to give myself partial credit here. Like I was wrong, but I was almost like I didn't expect this rushing production to come from him. And yeah, he started to step it up in the second half of last year after inexplicably not running at the first half of his rookie season. But what he's doing now, the level that he's producing about half a point. So an EPA is about half a point every single time he scrambles or he runs the ball, which is just insane, right? Like that's higher production than Patrick Mahomes' MVP per drop back. Like he's just producing. The closest thing we've seen to this is Cam Newton in 2011. It's just way more than what Lamar Jackson did last year, way more than any other Cam Newton season. So the question is it sustainable? And I admit when I watch it, it looks pretty sustainable because he's literally not getting touched on these runs, right? But then I just I have to temper the thought of that just because this is an outlier sort of thing. So is it, how confident are we that that's going to continue? Because if you take out the scrambles, you take out the rushes, which obviously, it's a big part of his game, no doubt. But if you take those out, he's kind of like a mid-tier quarterback in his efficiency, if not like a little bit lower than that, and what he does when he's not doing that. So I would be more confident in him going forward if the mix between the two, even if the final result was the same, if the mix between the two was a little bit more equal as far as how he's deriving his production. But can you stop it? Like that's another thing I was thinking about.
Right.
Like defenses, is there even a numbers way of being able to stop what he's doing running the ball? Because no one's figured it out so far.
It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it. I mean, last week, literally, until, and I mean, he had a monster fantasy week, and the Cardinals were in the game obviously until the end. They wound up winning on the last play, but he was right around 200 yards with 0 touchdown passes until that Hail Mary to DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
And their passing game, with the exception of a few deep balls to Christian Kirk, and I do think Christian Kirk is a good player, but it has been just their passing game has been slant route or like outside comeback to, curl route, hitch to DeAndre Hopkins, boom, 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 like repetitively. And like, that's been it. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald has given them nothing. They get, nothing from their tight ends, they don't even play Isabella. And Kyler hasn't been that great as a passer, I think, for the second consecutive year, but he's Allen Iverson as a runner. And, I'm with you that when you watch it, it looks like you can't stop it, even though, when you look at it from a number standpoint, it's like, God, he's got to hit, regression's got to hit him at some point.
And these runs are long. Like he's, I mean, you could think, scoring from
they're long and
yards,
they're fucking touchdowns, Kevin. Like,
and he's not getting touched. Yeah,
touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, you could think, 15 yards, but 15 yards is a big deal. Like being able to run in from 15 yards doesn't happen that often. I don't care if it's the quarterback or not, but he's running in from 15 yards. He's running in from 25 yards. He's running in, all the time. Yes, and he's getting some of those like ones where he's just embarrassing players on the goal line. And this reminds me that I'm going to go back to, I know we had a little like a DM thread with some other PFF guys. We're comparing basketball players to football players. I'm liking this like Allen Iverson comparison to Kyler Murray, because I feel like the foot speed and the quickness and all of that stuff is just like on another level, combined with some somewhat inefficient shooting, which would be like his passing game. So that's kind of how I see him, and I'm just wondering where are we going to settle? Where are we going to settle going forward if it can continue going forward? But this is definitely something I could be wrong against. But generally, I like to bet against things we've never seen before continuing, essentially.
Yep. All right. So with my next pick, I'm going to select. Who's that? Who's that, Kevin?
Oh, is that King? Is that the King Henry right there?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Rich Rebar sent me that shirt, my favorite shirt by far now. So, I have my levels of skepticism regarding the Titans. Their defense hasn't been as good this year. They're not going to get Taylor Lewan back, which I think is big. The way that they play, being, such a run-heavy team is not, the best way, I think, to get to the top of the mountain. I wish they used Derrick Henry more in the passing game, although he really hasn't justified it this year. I wish they would just throw him 2 screen passes a game, because I don't think that anybody, in the NFL at linebacker or, at defensive back wants to tackle Derrick Henry in the open field. And, I'm definitely, aligned with, the, analytical people and, like yourself and PFF, in that teams that emphasize the run over the passing game, put themselves at somewhat of a disadvantage. But I also think that the Titans can do things in the passing game where they can remain very, very efficient, even if it's a lower volume passing game, because AJ Brown is a god. And Corey Davis, I think, has sort of emerged as a really solid number 2 receiver this year. And Johnny Smith in the full-time role has been pretty good as their main tight end. He's also a guy that can block. And I like Arthur Smith. I think that he could be a guy that emerges as a head coaching candidate within the next 2 years. And obviously, I love King Henry. And the Titans have done some really, really interesting things, I think, from a coaching perspective, whether it be Mike Vrabel, taking accepting that penalty to put his team in an advantageous situation. And they're 6-3 so far. And the AFC South, like it's between them and the Colts. And I think that they are, although they got smashed by the Colts last Thursday night, I think they're just as good as the Colts, if not better. So I think they can win that division. I think that they can play with almost anybody in the NFL offensively. Their defense has been the weakness of the team this year, and hopefully they can just get because over the past 2 seasons, the previous 2 seasons, they were a team that really was one of the best in the NFL at limiting points allowed. It's been different this year. Hopefully they can get back to that over the second half of the season.
Yeah, I guess that the defense is what I'm a little bit worried about. It's mattering or not, you can say, but yeah, I mean they played okay against the Bills, but like I said, I think the Bills were a little bit better than what the numbers finally ended up showing there. They had a good game against the Bears as far as holding down the Bears, but that's kind of like that's not much of an accomplishment there. And then against the Broncos, they did pretty well. But other than that, they've just kind of been getting stomped on by a lot of offenses, and they've been able to produce sometimes and overcome that. So that would be the question for me is, can that offense like overcome the defense that many times in a row? It's definitely possible, but a lot of things are going to have to go right for them offensively to do that. Okay, so we can pick up the pace a little bit here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip over to the team that just embarrassed your Titans, and that would be the Colts. I liked Phillip Rivers when they brought him in a lot more than some other people. I think the talk of him being done was probably a little bit premature. And, he's had some really bad seasons in the past. I think 2013 was probably one of his worst seasons, and he came back, and he's playing pretty well this season. They have the defense, unlike the Titans, to probably be able to sustain them. The question is still going to be whether you can get that type of streak out of Rivers going forward. So he's who I'm going to pick here. I'm going to pick the Colts here rather than taking a little bit more speculative play on the Raiders or the Browns or someone like that.
I like the Colts because I think that they are a high variance team. I think their defense is rock solid. They run a zone defense, and I mean they don't give up big plays. They don't give up many points. They played a pretty easy schedule early in the year, but then they've shown that they can really limit some of the better offense in the league. And this week will be another good test for them against Green Bay. But they've been just really stingy and suffocating on defense. If they can, I can't believe how poor their run game has been this season. And Jonathan Taylor, I think, has been one of the biggest disappointments in all of football, including fantasy. But I think they're high variance because Phillip Rivers has had some really good games and some bad games. But if he can have, one of those late season / playoff runs, sort of like, we saw it from Joe Flacco when the Ravens won the Super Bowl, if they can get T.Y. Hilton going. I loved what I saw from Michael Pittman against the Titans this past Thursday night.
Pittman seems like he's going to be really big as far as, maybe fit a little bit better than Hilton does with Rivers also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, they've got depth at receiver too. They've got in Marcus Johnson, they've got 3 tight ends that they can play. Their offensive line has been healthy. It's underachieved, but it's been healthy. I probably should have picked them over the Titans, but I'm wearing the Derrick Henry shirt, so Had to
It
take
worked
the
with that. Plus,
Titans.
we have to support. I need a Chris Ballard shirt also, which
Oh yeah,
I almost
love Chris
canceled him
Ballard.
when they drafted a running back, but
Traded up for a running back.
yeah, traded up for running back. Although I have a sneaking suspicion some of this is influenced by Frank Reich, who I'm sure is a great coach, but sometimes don't let these guys get involved in personnel. I know he was pounding the table for Paris Campbell, I guess, who hasn't been bad, who hasn't been that bad, but he was pounding the table
He's
for him the
never
year
played.
before, and that
Right.
hasn't. I'm not a big offensive weapon guy. All right.
So we're nearing the end of teams that I'm really interested in. Although I do think there's about 4 teams
All right.
left on the board
Yeah. Why don't
that are
we
worth.
just go? We can just go one more each,
Okay.
and then close
Okay.
it out since it's been going a little long here. And I'll yeah. So
It's going to make it tough.
I'll let you have this one.
I mean, I feel like I have to take the Dolphins, but I can't let the Patriots go undrafted. So I'm just going to take the Patriots.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, Stephon Gilmore eventually is going to be back, might even be back this week. They've got a good offensive line. I think that they're a team that has always been so good at minimizing their weaknesses and maximizing their strengths. And Cam is absolutely a dude that can get hot. And I think he's started to play a lot better lately. And they're, one of the best coach teams in the NFL. So I'm going to take them. I actually, if I had more than one pick left, I would have taken the Dolphins, but I only have one pick left. So I'm going to take the Patriots.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a team that I don't really know what to make of them offensively for the Patriots. I mean, I guess the fact that we have this Jacoby Myers emerging is shockingly like a huge deal because they really did not have anyone. I mean, even when they had Julian Edelman, it was a pretty low ceiling type of passing attack, unless you're playing the Seahawks. Then somehow the ceiling is raised for anyone playing against their pass defense. So yeah, I like that there. Now I'm a little bit more conflicted here than maybe you would think about whether to take the Dolphins or not, only because
there are a couple of good teams here left.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I am. This is a tough one here. I am. Okay, no, you know what? I am gonna take the Dolphins for the last pick here. Although I have to say, I think it's pretty close to. I'm pretty close on potentially taking the Browns, even though I'm just. So I'll talk. I mean, I think we kind of know the Dolphins thing, but with the Browns, I may be a little bit higher than some others on them because Baker has been bad this year. Everyone knows he's bad. But they do play the Ravens. They do play the Steelers. They do have multiple poor weather games that they've been going through here. He hasn't really been given the chance to really pass the ball that much this season. So I think there could be some difficulties there. So maybe I'm a little bit higher in what his potential is, but I still have to go with the Dolphins just because of all the pieces that are coming together defensively. And Tua, I still think Tua is a little bit to be determined at this point, but he's doing exactly what you would want to see him do in the game situations that he's had. So I think you could say he's been a low ceiling type of quarterback is what he's done so far, but he hasn't had to, he hasn't been put in that situation yet. And he has been able to drive down the ball down the field when needed to win games and to put points on the board to beat teams like the Cardinals. So for that reason and the faith in the defense and faith in Brian Flores, I'm gonna choose the Dolphins there.
Yeah, I think that's the chalky pick. And we started at the top talking about these teams that have sort of taken a 1 or 2 year step back, and it shouldn't be characterized as tanking. And certainly the coaches and the players themselves should never be expected to tank. And the players have so much to gain by putting their best performance out there on tape. But these teams that have taken short-term step backs in favor of trying to make long-term gains in the Browns and the Dolphins, and nobody's talking about this, but I mean, they have seen significant gains in a short period of time. The Browns absolutely did that. The Dolphins did that for a year. And I mean, I remember talking with you, Kevin, about this. Like, you didn't think that the Dolphins would be a multi-year rebuild. You thought that if I recall correctly, you thought they would be maybe a 1 year rebuild. And we're already seeing the gains that they have made. They cleared a bunch of cap space. They, had a bunch of draft picks, and they're going to miss on, a bunch of those draft picks, as they know. That's why you try to stockpile draft picks. And they've seen, very, immediate returns from a lot of those draft picks. They're a well-coached team. So are the Browns now. The Browns are a really well-coached team. And, I think the Jaguars are doing that same thing, and hopefully they can be I wonder if this is going to be the impetus for a lot of other teams to, maybe do the same thing, where you just take a 1 or 2 year step back. It's not, I wouldn't even characterize it as a tank. I would characterize it as making short-term sacrifices to try to have long-term gains, which is something that is very, very approved of in like real life, by a human being, but for some reason gets shitted on in the sporting world because everybody tries to be hardos.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened with the Browns is, number one, they wanted Sean McDermott and not Hugh Jackson. So if you have McDermott there, they probably don't go 1-31 those 2 years, and that wasn't the plan. I mean, I think that's also a bit of confusion. Is yes, it was the plan to clear the decks and rebuild the foundation in 2016, but going into 2017, they took Garrett at the top. They signed Kevin Zeitler. They signed some other players. They were not tanking at that point. They were building, but they just happened to have their worst season. So I think that's how those two things got conflated together, like the multi-year philosophy of a tank, when that wasn't really what they were aiming for. And again, this was not what the Dolphins were aiming for either. And they happened to play really well. And I think what I really like about what the Dolphins have done is, they didn't get that number 1 pick, right? But they still have been able to build and to do what they've done. And, they used a second-round pick on Josh Rosen, a total waste, right? But why not? I feel like you have to be willing to waste picks sometimes, and you can really be willing to waste picks if you have extra picks, right? Those are the times that you can be willing to make those types of moves. So that's why I really like what the Dolphins have done.
And you know what they also, both of those teams did, the Dolphins and the Browns, is they both corporate rated the Texans, because they got they identified the Texans as teams that, as a team that was, and Sam Hinkie, I think, did this with the Sacramento Kings, I believe.
Yeah, Sacramento Kings.
He identified, that team as the Texans, or as the Dolphins and the Browns did with the Texans, as a team to bet against. And the Browns wound up getting it with the number 4 overall pick, I believe.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins now own the first and the second round picks of the Texans. Is that correct?
No, I think they just have the first round pick, right?
I think
it's multi-years.
Well, they certainly have the first. Yeah.
They definitely have the first. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay. Well, either way,
I can check.
Yeah.
But the Browns had the first and the second round pick from the Texans, which ended up being Denzel Ward, and probably wouldn't have been Nick Chubb if Sanshi was there. But still, that's who it ended up being. But it is kind of amazing from the Texans' perspective, because this is a team that was expecting to compete when they're giving away these picks, and now they potentially given away 2 top 5 picks and a top 5 pick in the second round as part of these deals. So yeah, not too pleasant there from the Texans. But they're building culture. They got their culture where they want it to be going forward. So they have that for them. But anyway, Evan, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you going through this with me. I know you have a very busy schedule. Everyone's already following you at Evan Silva. Everyone's already checking out the stuff at Establish the Run. I love the stuff that you and Adam are doing over there. Some of the best football analysis and fantasy football analysis available out there. And you're a legend in your own time. So I appreciate you joining me.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.